Good morning. Welcome to Crossroads Christian Church. If you're a guest today with us, we're especially glad that you have chosen to worship with us. We have some announcements to make today. First of all, tonight we have our children's program starting at 6 o'clock. If the kids are in the program, they need to be here at 5:30. We want to thank you for the huge response we had last week to adopt a family. We had such a great response that we've added another family. So if you would like to help that family, please go see the tags that are on the wall in the Welcome Center. This Tuesday, the women are having their Christmas party. They're going to be doing some crafts, and so we'd like for you to attend. You bring $12 and enjoy the fun and the fellowship. Finally, because of all the services that we have this month, we are going to set up chairs today after the third service in the big room. We appreciate your help. Thank you for being here today, and we hope that you enjoy our services.
Good morning, everyone. Hey, it's good to see you. Today, we are wrapping up our series in Revelation. And so for 6 weeks, we've been talking through this book of Revelation. And if you've been here for it or listened online or anything like that, some of you, if you have any ideas about Revelation, you may be saying to yourself, now wait a minute, Matt. I mean, we've studied Revelation and we haven't talked about the 144,000. I mean, people knock at my door and want to talk to me about that, and I don't have any answers, and so you didn't talk about that. You didn't talk about the mark of the beast and what it's going to look like and chips and all this other stuff. It's been 6 weeks, and Matt, you did not talk about the end time millennium, the 1,000 years. You didn't tell us about premillennial, amillennial, or postmillennial. And if that means nothing to you right now, good. You didn't talk about the tribulation, you didn't talk about rapture, and you didn't tell us if the Left Behind fiction books are what's really going to happen. A few of you caught that, good. You didn't tell us about those things. We didn't argue about that, and I really wanted to talk about those things because I got to argue with a friend at work because they bring it up all the time. And you're right. We didn't talk about them main stage. You're absolutely correct. One is because we provided you trustworthy resources on the website that you can learn all about those as you like. One of the other reasons that we didn't talk about some of those things is because it's real easy to get stuck in the weeds on those things and miss the point. And that's not what this series has been about. Our series has not been about which millennium view that you hold so you can argue it. And for some of us, we really don't know what any of those views mean. We hold on to what some preachers would call the pan-millennial view. It's all going to pan out in the end, right? Like that, and that's fine. Because here's the reason that all the way through this series, we've held on to this idea that the book of Revelation is not for prediction, it's for preparation. And no matter where you land on some of these more major issues in the book of Revelation, they all boil down to one thing. Jesus is coming soon. No matter where you're at, okay, on numbers, and no matter where you're at on end time views, it still is leading to this point of an end time. When Jesus is going to come soon. And our job in reading through the book of Revelation is not to predict exactly what's going to happen. It's to prepare and prepare well. That's why it was written. To prepare the early churches for the someday when Jesus is going to return. And so no, we didn't jump into the weeds on some of those things. but we look forward to when Jesus is coming soon. In the last couple weeks, Justin and we have talked about evil, temptations, Satan, beasts, dragons, persecution, difficult times. It's really been encouraging, I know. Right? In the last couple weeks, we've talked about these things, but that's not where we're going to end. And the reason being is because that's not how Revelation ends. Revelation doesn't end in this moment of defeat. Revelation doesn't end in this moment of hopelessness. And Revelation doesn't end with a dragon or a beast victorious. That's not how it ends. And so because that's not how Revelation ends, that's not how we're going to end either. This morning we're going to wrap this all up with an unimaginable picture that should breathe hope into our lives every day. A picture that's hard for our minds to even grasp hold of. And as John, the person writing Revelation, as he writes these words and paints a picture for us, we're going to pray this morning that we are able to hold on to just a little bit of what he's describing. I want to pray and we're going to jump in. God, I'm so thankful. I'm thankful for your church. God, I'm thankful for those that are in the room now. Or will be this morning. God, I'm thankful that we can be together and we can learn and we can study. And Father, I pray this morning that as we learn and as we study, I pray that we're not just here out of habit or routine or because someone made us be here. And God, I pray this morning that even if that's how we walked in the door, I pray in this moment right now we will desire to understand or to see you more clearly. That's the code that we're trying to break, is to see you more clearly, Jesus. I'm thankful that each and every one of us in the room, if we have turned our lives over to you, we're not defined by all of the broken in our lives. God, we're defined by Jesus. And I pray over these next few minutes that as we look at heaven, God, you will give us just a glimpse. You will help us to hold on to just a little bit of understanding of what John is writing. And God, that it will breathe into us. God, it will give us energy to face the broken that we live in. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. A little over a year ago, my family and I, we traveled to Japan. And some of you know, my sister was stationed over there. Well, her husband was stationed over there. We went over to visit. And when we came back, we were over there about 8 days. When we came back, everybody wanted to know, hey, what was it like? And so then I would describe different parts of what we experienced while we were in Japan. And some of the questions would come in the form of, what was it like? Did you see the old ancient ruined part of Japan? And I would say, yeah, one day we went to this bamboo forest and there was, ancient Japanese huts and buildings and everything like that. And I would try to describe what they look like. Different people would ask me, did you go to Tokyo? I said, yes, we went to Tokyo. Tokyo was my favorite part. I know, outside of seeing my sister, but I'm supposed to say that. Tokyo was my favorite part of the trip. And I mean, I've been to big cities. I grew up in a big city, but I've never been to a city like Tokyo. And I would describe the lights and the buildings and everything like that. I would describe what's known as the Shibuya crossing in Tokyo. It's where 7 roads all intersect in one spot. And at one moment, there are cars going every different direction, and then all the lights change, and then there's that many people times 4 all crossing in different ways. And I think I crossed it like 4 times. Like just, I want to walk this way and experience it. I want to walk this way. Like there's people all over the place. And then the lights change and there's cars all over the place. There's a Starbucks up above on a second story of a building. And I went up there and I just watched, standing in Starbucks, all these people move every which way. It was amazing to me. Now I would describe, different people would ask, well, what was it like to ride on a plane with 3 young kids for 13 hours? And I would try to describe that. Different people ask me, well, did you visit any temples or shrines? Because that's a big part of Japanese culture. And we did that, and I'll explain what those look like. A lot of people ask me, well, what about the food? What about the food? Did you try the food over there? And I would say, oh, yeah. Yeah, we tried the food. And some of it was awesome, all right? And then there was other that wasn't. We went to this place called the Sushi Go Round. And you sit at this booth, and for me, it was my left, there's a conveyor belt okay, that goes around. And on this conveyor belt are dessert-sized plates, and on them are all different kinds of sushi. Now, I don't like sushi here, all right? And I don't like sushi there, okay? But Emily loves sushi, and so we went, and we sat there, and what you do is anytime you want to try something, you just pull the plate off, and you eat it, and then connected to between the table and the conveyor belt is this little trap door, and you slide your plate down in this door, and it counts plates, and you pay by the plate, okay? And so that's how this place worked. And so I tried a few things, all right? I loved the stuff that, all right, that was great. But I didn't want to go and just say, well, I just ate, whatever. And so I tried a couple of things, and some of them were all right, and some of them went in the slot with the plate. Emily, my wife, she's over there trying everything. Sea urchin, octopus, all kinds of stuff. All right, that wasn't me. Okay, I'm over at the other table. But we're trying all of this stuff. And as I try to explain, that's what some of the food looks like. Someone asked me, did you drive over there? And I said, yeah, I did. And so I tried to explain what it was like to sit in the wrong side of a car, driving on the wrong side of the road in a place where I've never been before. And it was a lot more work than it was driving here. All right, you have to think about everything that you do, so you do it opposite. And as I've tried to explain what our trip was like and what we experienced and everything like that, I always feel like I'm doing an injustice to our trip in the explanation. I always feel like I'm grasping for more words or a better description of some of the things that we observed and that we saw and that we understood. Because as much as I try to explain it, and as much as I try to put into words things that we saw and experienced, I just feel like it's not enough. And maybe some of you have been on a trip or been on a vacation or been someplace and you come home and someone says, what was it like? And you try to put into words what it was like, what you experienced, things that you saw. And I know for myself, I always feel like there's just not enough words to describe all the emotions we experienced, all of the different things that we saw, all of the different aspects of a different culture. I always just wish that I had a little bit more to describe it with. This is the exact point where John's at the end of Revelation. John is given a glimpse of heaven. And then John has to put what he sees into words that we and the early churches can understand. And in a few short chapters, he tries to describe this picture of eternity. He tries to describe this picture of a throne. He tries to describe a picture of perfection that our minds, the Bible says that our minds have not conceived, which means that we honestly cannot fathom or understand what heaven is going to be like. And as I say heaven, and as we talk about that, all around the room, all of us, we have this picture of what heaven's going to be like. And maybe it's from growing up in church and you were taught this. Maybe it's from something you saw in a movie. We have these different ideas of what heaven's going to be like. For some of us, we have this idea that heaven is going to be all of us floating around on clouds, holding a harp, wearing a white sheet. It's going to be just magical. Like we have that idea of heaven. Some of us, we have this idea that heaven's going to be this forever long concert. And we're just going to sing, and maybe we're going to, at the beginning, we're going to pick up a hymn book and open to page 1 and just start. We're going to work our way through and then start over. And then about halfway through eternity, then we're going to get a projection screen. All right, and then we'll move into the contemporary songs. We've got this idea that that's what heaven's going to be like. If we're honest this morning, some of us, we think eternity, that's a really long time. It's forever. There's no end to it. How are we not going to get bored? Right? For some of us, we've had that thought. Like, that's a really long time, and after I ride, heaven's go-karts, and, after we go to heaven's movies and eat Chick-fil-A all the time, like, what are we going to do, Like, we have this idea in our minds of what heaven's going to be like. And it's all of those ideas are built off something we can understand. And when John writes, he writes in a way to try to communicate to us something that we can understand of what heaven's going to be like. Why? Why? Because I'm fully convinced, friends, that an earthly view of heaven changes everything. If we can live with a perspective of what's to come, it changes what's happening right now. And so John writes in Revelation chapter 21. If you brought a Bible, go ahead and open up. You can look it up on your phone. It'll also be on the screen. Revelation chapter 21. John is describing heaven. And he says these words beginning in verse 1 of chapter 21. He says, Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. There was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Look, God's dwelling place is among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eye. There will be no more pain, or no more death, no more mourning, no more crying or pain. For the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all of this and will be their God, and they will be my children. We're going to pause. John paints this picture of what he sees, and he uses this word 3 times that we just read, the word new. A new heaven and a new earth, and I'm making everything new. The word new can also be understood as restored. I'm restoring everything to the way that it's supposed to be. And as we read this word new, I'm restoring everything. I'm making everything as it was supposed to be. You see, sin entered perfection at the very beginning and everything broke. And so it's at this moment when a new heaven and a new earth, all of a sudden all things are restored. Things are made new. I have a confession. Hey, and I just want to be honest and don't judge too much. Listen, I like to watch some TV. That's not the confession part, okay? I like to watch some TV. I like police shows and I love sports, but there's something else I like. I like to watch HGTV. I do, all right? Okay, not all of HGTV, okay? But I enjoy watching like the house rehab shows. The Property Brothers, some of the things like that. I enjoy that. And I always tell Emily, listen, if we had the money to do this, and if I knew anything about construction, I would love to do this. She knows both of those are not true, and so we're never going to do it, okay? Which is why I watch it on TV, okay? But I enjoy watching these shows. I do, and you can judge me. That's all right. I enjoy watching old, dilapidated houses. And I enjoy watching someone come in and see it from a different perspective. And through the course of the show, work to change it, work to fix it up. And one thing about these shows that I never understand is every episode of Property Brothers, they get in the middle of the house, they're like, oh, we found this, it's going to cause extra. And every time the couple's like, no. It's like, have you never watched the show you're on? Every episode they find that. Like, plan it in at the beginning. Okay, but it's part of the process of restoring and taking something that's old and broken and run down, and all of a sudden it's shifted and it's molded and walls are torn down and new things are brought in, and all of a sudden you get to the end of the show and this family or this couple, this individual, they walk in, and maybe some of you have experienced this in real life and you've done this to a house or whatever. And you walk in and sometimes you hear phrases like, I can't even tell where I'm at. And a lot of times, you, whether on TV or even in real life, you walk in and you hear or you say a phrase, wow, it looks like new. It looks like new. It very well, it's the same structure. but it looks new. Why? Because it's been restored. It's been made right, which is the exact thing that God does with his creation. Is in the end, he makes it right. He makes everything as though it's supposed to be. He makes everything in the picture that he painted it in the very beginning. And as John explains this, he says, listen, we're going to trace this all the way back to the garden. In the very beginning, with Adam and Eve, everything was right, everything was perfect, and then sin jumped in and everything broke. And so we're going to restore, we're going to make things new. There's a new earth, and it comes down out of heaven, which means God's been working on it. God's preparing it for us. It's going to be good. And it's not going to be broken anymore. And he describes this moment when this happens. And he uses another comparison that we can understand. He compares it to a wedding day. A wedding day. And some of you experienced a wedding day. And some of you have been at weddings or been in weddings. And there's this moment in a wedding. Okay? And as someone who officiates weddings, a lot of times the question I get is from the bride is, how early can we get here to start getting ready? And I say, here's a key, because I'm not getting here that early. All right? Why? Because a bride gets ready all day long. What I figured out, guys typically, unless the bride tells them we're taking pictures early, guys get ready about 20 minutes early. All right? They put the tux on, they put the suit on, okay? They maybe look in the mirror if the bride's lucky, all right? And then they come up and stand up front. Like, that's about the extent of it. A bride, and I've A, never been a bride, and B, I've never been a part of that process, nor do I want to be, okay? But a bride gets here early and starts all day long. It's this all-day ordeal, right? This is all-day preparation for this moment. This moment when she stands outside the doors. And as I stand here oftentimes and look down the aisle, there's the groom, and typically he's too far off to the side, and so I kind of have to pull him and be like, you want to look at her, you want to see that. And, oh, okay, yeah, brain goes out the window, it's fine. But and so we're standing here, and all of a sudden the doors fly open, and all day preparation, this is the exclamation point, right? All of the time of hair and everything else that I don't know anything about, all of that time was built for this moment right here, where in beauty and perfection the doors swing open and she walks in. And even if you're at a wedding, you have seen this and you experience this, that moment of joy, that moment of beauty, that moment of anticipation all boils up right into this moment when she walks in the door. It's those emotions, it's that excitement that John is comparing to this moment when we see the brilliance and the perfection of heaven. Listen, as many weddings as I've done, you know what I've never heard? And I pray that I never do hear. What I've never heard at a wedding is after the father gives daughter away, or whoever's giving away, as they're walking up on stage, you know what I've never heard? I've never heard the groom lean over to the bride and say, I wish you looked prettier. I've never heard that. And you can imagine, based on your laughter, you can imagine how that would go over, right? I'd be testifying in court, as would everybody else in the room. We'd have to clean the carpets right here. It'd be a bloody mess, all right? You know how that would go down. It would be terrible. It'd be the worst thing that you could possibly say in that moment. And for some of us, this is the view that we have of God. And that we, as part of the church, as part of the bride, as we prepare for this moment, we have this idea that God is going to look at us and say, I wish you did better. And as John paints this scene for us of heaven, that's the farthest thing that God says. We've talked about wrath. We've talked about sin. We've talked about all those things. But in this moment, God looks at his bride and he says, it's done. And he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And I will be with you, and you will be with me, and it will be right. It will be perfect. Everything will be as it's supposed to be. That's what the King will look at us and say. This is who I am, and I am with you. John continues to describe what it is that this city looks like. He says in Revelation, continuing in chapter 21, beginning of verse 9, he says, one of the seven angels with the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues came and said to me, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the spirit to a mountain, great and high, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. It shone with the glory of God and its brilliance, and was like that of a very precious jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates and with 12 angels. Remember, 12 is the number of perfection, okay, completion. On the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. And there were 3 gates on the east, 3 on the north, 3 on the south, and 3 on the west. The wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lambs. And the angel who talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates, and its walls. And the city was laid out like a square, as long as it is wide. As long as it is wide. He measured the city with the rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia in length, and as wide and high as it is long. The angel measured the wall using human measurement, and it was 144 cubits thick. The wall was made out of jasper, and the city pure as gold, pure as glass. And before we just write this off of not understanding stadia and cubits and all of these other things, someone who's far better at math and an understanding of this moment, put this in some terms that maybe we can grasp hold of and understand. Okay, because we read this, and especially in our part of the country, some of us think to ourselves, wait a minute, heaven's a big city? I don't want anything to do with it. I mean, I want to do heaven, but, big city heaven. I mean, isn't there rule like farm heaven? Like, can I go there? Like, that's my cup of tea. Where are the tractors here? That's what I got to figure out. I got to hunt in heaven, okay? Like, we're wondering. And so to give us some perspective and some understanding of what this city looks like. When you look at the measurements of this, it's 1,500 miles cubed. And as John writes, there is a height measurement that's given several different times. So there's this idea that there maybe is levels, okay? Not like earn different levels, but just different levels of heaven to live on. And someone did some math using these different measurements. That it would be estimated that there would be 45 million miles of road. 45 million miles of road. The typical city has about 10 blocks per mile. All right, and in different places in Scripture we read of in heaven, there will be, I'm going to prepare a place, my Father's house, there will be many mansions. Okay, so if you take this mansion idea, and if you were to take and say, okay, we've got mansions, we're going to put 4 mansions on every block. That means on level 1, there would be 1 billion mansions. And let's say you get to heaven and you say, hey, wait a minute, okay, I'm really excited about this heaven thing, and before I pick mine out, or before God, shows me which one I'm going to spend eternity in, can I take a tour? I'd like to tour the mansions of heaven, please. Where do I sign up for that excursion? Okay, if we were to say that, and we were to go on the mansion tour of heaven, okay, if you were to look at 60 mansions a day for 12 hours a day, that would equal 6 million years of looking at the mansions of heaven. That's a long time of mansion looking, all right? That's a long time. You see, the city, heaven, it's huge. And I mean, we are told in different places that we can pass in and out of the city, and that's why there's gates, okay? And so there hopefully will be more expanse that we can travel and hunt and all of those things that some of us like. And so there's this picture, though, for us to grab hold of the magnitude and the power that is communicated all over the place. Heaven is There's rich jewels, jasper, and a little bit later, there's all kinds of different jewels. There's gold, which is where we get this idea of pearly gates and streets of gold. Because heaven and the city of heaven is purity. It's right. It's to echo and reflect the glory of God. We read a little bit later that there's no reason for lights in heaven because the glory of God shines and lights this place up for everybody to see. You see, John paints this picture for us. And he says, heaven, it's going to be expansive, and it's going to be new, and it's going to be right, and it's going to be just as how God wants it. And it's hard for us to even fathom what this looks like. He tells us this is what heaven, this is a glimpse of heaven. He tells us what it's going to be like. He tells us a little bit of how it's going to be played out, this coming out of heaven. He does a little bit of comparison. These are some of the emotions that you'll experience. This is some comparison for understanding of what this moment will be like. But maybe better than anything else that John communicates is not what it's going to look like, but is when he communicates what's not going to be there. But when John communicates what's not going to be in heaven, in 21 verse 4, he says, he will wipe away every tear from their eye, and there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. No more. You see, these elements don't have a place in eternity. There's no more. There's no more of the hurt that we experience. There's no more of the brokenness that we live in. There is no more. And where we're at right now in the life that we experience, we live in the broken. Which is why there is such a need for us to live each and every day with an earthly view of what is to come of heaven. Because when we live with an earthly view of what's to come, it changes everything. In heaven, friends, in heaven there's no more depression. There's no more hurt. There's no more funerals. There's no more taxes. There's no more chemotherapy. There's no more anxiety. There's no more radiation. There's no more lonely meals. There's no more stillborn babies or infertility. There's no more middle of the night phone calls. There's no more insurance premiums. There's no more divorce. There's no more murder. There's no more suicide. There's no more chemistry or algebra tests. There's no more failed dates. There's no more rape. There's no more abuse. There's no more struggles. There's no more heartbreak. There's no more racism. There's no more slavery. There's no more human trafficking. There's no more political parties. There's no more government because there already is a king. There is no more of the broken of this world. Why is it do we look forward to heaven? It's because that's where all things are made new. And all of the brokenness around us and all of the brokenness in us is made right. That's why we look forward to heaven. And when we live each day on this earth, looking for that day, it breathes hope into us. For some of us, we can read all about what heaven is, but it's the words of what won't be there that give us hope. It's the words of what is right, which is where we find victory. You see, when we get to the point where we live with an earthly view of heaven, then we get to a point where we understand the words that John ends Revelation with, where Jesus says, yes, I am coming soon. And John's response to that is, in chapter 22, the end of verse 20, he says, come, Lord Jesus. There's this living with the anticipation of Jesus. Please come and fix this. Please make things new. Please make things right. Please take this brokenness and get rid of it. Show us the new, Jesus. Please come and fix this place. Show us the no more, because I'm worn out of living in the broken. This is what we prepare for. And when we stand defined by Jesus, this is the victory that we experience. The battle of this life is done. And we can stand and we can sing and we can experience the glory of God and the heaven that is to come, because Jesus has paid our admission price in, where there's no more broken and all things are made right. And so we prepare, and we prepare well for the someday soon when this is going to play out. And we don't know, which is why we prepare well. Because an earthly view of heaven, it changes everything. Why don't we go ahead and stand together? Some of the elements of heaven are too far outside of our understanding, any of us. But there's some parts of heaven that we can grab hold of. There's a part of heaven, of the no more, that we can celebrate, right? Where Jesus makes things new. And we don't experience all of the stress that we live with. There's a part of heaven that we're invited. It's the victory that Jesus has, the defeat of the beast, the defeat of the dragon, the defeat of Satan himself, that not even death wins. That as followers of Jesus, we get to stand and we get to echo these words for eternity. Hey, my Jesus won. And there's nothing you can do. There's no broken that wins the day, because I made all things new, and we hold on to that. And so this morning, that's what we're going to sing about. There is an element of revelation through and through that talks about our worship. And so this morning, we're going to end our time doing that with some words that maybe are familiar to us, that speak about a victory that Jesus has for eternity. We talked about at the beginning this idea of where, we're all going to fly around on harps and everything like that. And I don't necessarily see the truth completely in that. But what I do know is there will be freedom. There will be freedom to celebrate in. There will be a newness to celebrate. There will be an excitement in heaven that we can stand before our King, where everything is right and broken is gone. And we can say, man, this is good. This is good. And so while we're here on this earth right now in this moment, we're going to look with a perspective of heaven, and we're going to celebrate the victory that we have in Jesus.